You know, both of these songs, even that first song, really talks about what an awesome God that we have and how that we have the ability through Him to rejoice and celebrate because we serve a God who knows right where you are and loves you so much.
Amazing day, amazing morning. Hey, the weather's getting terrible out there. Don't worry, you get home hopefully. We left out this morning and I started to think, oh my goodness, it didn't seem like it was that raining on my truck. And I was like, well, maybe I'm just a bad driver. I never really know a bad driver. Anyway, so I want to welcome you. If you're new to Catalyst, welcome. I hope you enjoy what you get to witness today. We try to stick really close to the Word of God. We stick right to the Word of God. I shouldn't say close. We stick right to the Word of God. There's a lot of great things that we can do as long as we bond together and understand that each one of us is not by ourselves out there on an island. We're all together. We fight this fight together. And if we fight it together, we become stronger, especially if we put Jesus as the main catalyst. I want to welcome you here and thank you. We have a couple now. We have a 9:30 Bible study. Tim Wertz has it. And then we have Betty does it for the kids. And it's great. And Justin and I are supposed to do it for the high school students, but we tend to fall short. We fall short. Sometimes I get here and I'm busy thinking. So we're going to really try to work on that. But at 9:30, everybody knows that life is tough. Life is hard. We struggle. Everybody struggles. How many of you struggle in your life in different ways? We all struggle. We all struggle. Some are financial. Some are addictions. There's just all kinds of struggles we have. And guess what? You know, the church, as a group of people, we're very similar. We, as pastors, you guys know us as pastors. None of the pastors here at Catalyst, you guys know none of us take salaries. We all work outside the church. And that's the way we love it. The reason we love that is because every penny allows every penny to go back to the church. Go back into the ministries. Go back to what we do the best. What we do the best is meet with people outside of this building, outside of this room here. And that's unheard of in other churches. So we want to continue to do that. So remember that as you give today. Understand that our church looks to be an amazing place. It looks to be a place where it's got everything you need, but it doesn't have unless you give. And I hate that. You all know me, I'm really bad about that, but the reality is if you don't give, we give. We have to make up. We have to work hard. Somebody has to make up for it. So just please let you know that the money goes to the ministries. Let's bow our heads and pray as the ushers come forward. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we love you so much. We thank you, Lord. We ask you, Lord, to continue to bless the Catalyst in ways that sometimes we don't understand, Lord, but sometimes we see visually. Lord, we ask you, Lord, that as we go day to day, Lord, that we trust in you and put our faith pray in your precious name. Amen.
We'll stand back up for this one. Christ is my reward, and all my devotion. And there's nothing in this world that could ever satisfy. Through every trial, my soul is safe, no turning back. I've been set free. Christ is enough for me. Christ is enough for me. Everything I need is in you. Everything I need I was a kid, we used to sing that song. We sang it as an anthem. There was nothing going to keep us from turning our back on Jesus for what he did for us. Jesus is a friend that sticks closer than a brother. He is someone who is there for you no matter what you're going through. I think sometimes when we get in a worship service, we tend to forget that this moment is not about us, but it's about the one who set us free. And someday I want to stand before him. My heart is pure, and I can say it is well with my soul. Through it all, my eyes are on you. And through it all is well. Give the Lord praise. You may be seated.
Well, today what I decided we're going to do, we're going to start looking in the book of Luke. And we live in and I'll tell you what we're going to do here in a second. We live in a different political and social culture than ever before. I was thinking about this and talking to my wife about it. When you turn on Fox News, you turn on CNN, what is always the headline anymore? It's always Trump. Have you ever remembered any president that's all they talked about the entire time was the president, the president, the president? We've got a very unusual president, don't we? One of the things that's very unusual about him is his Twitter account. Have we ever had a president with a Twitter account? First of all, how many of you have a Twitter account? Jeff has one. I have it, but I have not used it, honestly, in 10 years. But I do have one. But he uses it how many times a day? All day, every day. And when he puts it out there, whatever he posts, what happens with that? It's the news. It puts people in a firestorm every time he sends something out. Why? Because they're the words of our president, correct? If he was just the mogul that he was before, it might catch some attention, but it sure wouldn't catch a lot of attention. Would you agree with that? In the book of Luke, how many of you have one of those Bibles that have red letters in them? Any of you have those Bibles with red letters? What do those red letters represent? Jesus. You know what? I want to give him some attention. So what we're going to do for a little while, we're going to be looking through the book of Luke. We're going to start today and we're going to walk through it. Is what did Jesus have to say? And you know what? If there's anyone I want to listen to, it's really not Trump. I could care less. It's really not CNN. It's really not Fox News. I want to know what Jesus has to say. You know, and I want to correspond with what he had to say because his words must have been powerful. And I want to look at, we're going to start today for the very first time, that Jesus spoke to us, and it was when he was, does anyone know how old he was when he said his first words? 12 years old was the first time, I'm sure he spoke before, the first recorded words, are when he was 12 years old. So we're going to find out what he said when he was 12 years old. So look, if you will, to the book of Luke, Luke chapter number 2, and you can follow along in your own Bible, your electronic Bible, it might be up here on the screen here in a second. And we're going to walk through what happened. Now, Jesus is being raised in what city? Does anyone know what city Jesus was being raised in? He was born in Bethlehem, but he's from the city of Nazareth. So he's a Nazarite. He's being raised in a city called Nazareth. And so we're entering into Luke chapter number 2, verse 41. We've got Jesus being raised by, who are his earthly parents' names?
Mary and Joseph.
Mary and Joseph are raising him, and they're good people, they're good parents, they're raising him up in the city of Nazareth. Well, now we're in Luke chapter 2, and we're going to look at verse 41. It says, now the parents went to Jerusalem every year at the Feast of Passover. Now, every year his parents went to Jerusalem. And the reason I know we have indication that Jesus' parents, earthly parents, are good is because they were making sure they kept the Passover. Now, the Passover is something most of us, probably, maybe even all of us, don't even know what the Passover is. But it is a religious thing that they did every year. Every year you kept the Passover. I want to tell you what the Passover was, their significance, and we're going to get to what was happening. Now, first of all, they went to Jerusalem. Where did they live? Nazareth. Jerusalem is 80 miles away. So they're traveling to Jerusalem with their 12-year-old son, but it's not just the three of them. At this time, Mary and Joseph probably already had other children. They were also, we're going to find out a little bit later, they're, you guys remember MCI, Family and Friends? Anyone old enough to remember that stuff? They're traveling with their family and friends. It's a great entourage. It's a caravan of people going together. Probably several hundred people are caravanning together from Nazareth on over to Jerusalem. Now I want to give you the picture of what's going on. Jerusalem is a city that has a population estimated between 500,000, Springfield, Missouri, a little bit bigger than that, to 1 million people. Coming into Jerusalem during the Passover is anywhere between 200,000 at some estimates to 1.5 million more people coming into Jerusalem for the Passover. Now, what is the Passover? Do you remember back the time of, who was it? Was it Moses? Remember when the Israelites were captives in what nation was that? In Egypt. And they were captive for about 400 years. And remember the plagues that came upon them? You know, the last plague, if you remember, was the death of the firstborn. Y'all remember that? The death of the firstborn of all the Egyptians and all the animals and things like that. Firstborn of boys, I should say. And the only way it didn't affect the Israelites, you remember what they had to do? They had to take that's exactly right. Thank you. You had it in the back. Thank you. Good job. They took a lamb, they slaughtered the lamb, they took the blood of the lamb. On the doorpost, they had to take the blood, and if you can imagine taking the blood, they smeared it up the one side of the doorpost, over the top of the doorpost, and down by the bottom. And when the death angel came over, listen, the death angel would pass over their house. Do you understand the idea of Passover? It was passing over. They did not die. Their firstborn child did not die. Can you imagine what it was like that day in Egypt and the wailing and the crying when parents would walk into their firstborn child's room and that child is dead? I couldn't imagine what would happen if it was my son Caleb. I couldn't imagine the way I would react or his mother would have reacted. I don't know, Jeff, how would you react if Nico and Sadie, if Nico was gone all of a sudden? The wailing that was there and the despair and the agony that was going on to the Egyptians, but that did not happen to the Israelites because of the Passover. So now they're going to, and Jesus, or God, instituted upon the nation of Israel, I want you to remember that I delivered you through power out of the Egyptians into the promised land. And I want you to remember who I am, remember what I've done, and remember who I am by observing the Passover. So, well, what is this Passover they have to observe? And I'll kind of share it with you real quick. Now, we have, what are some of our months of the year? We've got January, February, March, April, stuff like that. Now, the Jews, they didn't have the same calendar as us, and they had a month. We would call it as a car, a Nisan, but that is a month. It's called Nisan. And on the 10th day of Nisan, here's what had to happen. So the Jews had to get to Jerusalem by the 10th of Nisan. It would be the equivalent to the end of April for us. Okay, the equivalent of that. They had to get to Nisan by the 10th of April. On the 10th of April, when they got there, they had to find a lamb, a male lamb under 1 year old that was without blemish. It couldn't have skin diseases. It couldn't, you follow me? It couldn't be sickly. It couldn't be lame. It couldn't be blind. It had to be a good lamb. Had no problems at all. On the 10th day of Nisan, they had to have this lamb. Now they had to care for the lamb for 4 days. Have you ever had an animal in your house that you had to care for? Now sometimes they're annoying. I've had those. But some of them you just love. A lamb, you're going to love. And you were falling in love with the lamb for 3 days. You cared for it. You fed it. You groomed it. You watered it, you took it out, it had to stink, I understand all those things, but you had to take care of the lamb. Here's what happened. On the 13th day, you had the lamb for 3 days. Whatever building you're in, okay, whatever building you're in, you might be in a house, you might be in a hotel if they had hotels, you might be in a tent, you might be in some accommodations made for you. You had to clear out your entire house of anything that was leaven with anything with yeast. So if you had bread that had risen or anything like that, you had to get rid of it. It talked about you had to go through the nooks and crannies of your house. You had to crawl on the floor and see if you found even a piece of leaven. You had to take it out, and some commentaries, some historians would say you have to burn the leaven. Some would say just throw it out. Some people, here's actually what happened. If you're a Jew, there weren't always Jews living in the city. You'd say, hey, I'll sell you my leaven to a friend that's not a Jew, and 8 days later you buy it back, so you have your leaven back. So there were workarounds, but they had to get rid of the leaven. Now there are a couple spiritual truths that's going on here. The pure lamb was coming into Jerusalem on the 10th day of Nisan. Most historians would also agree that it was on the 10th day of Nisan that Jesus walked into Jerusalem before his crucifixion. There's a lot of parallels that's going on there. Leaven is a picture of sin. And before you offer the sacrifice, you had to get rid of any sin that was in your life. And leaven is a picture of sin, so there was this cleansing. And then on the 14th day of Nisan, you've had this lamb for 4 days. For 1 day, you haven't had, you cleansed your house of the leaven. You've got now this lamb. Here's what you had to do. You had to go and take it to the temple. And the elder man of the house had to take the lamb to the temple and had to kill the lamb right there, slaughter the lamb. You would then gut the lamb. You would take out its kidneys and all the fat, and you would burn it on the altar as a sacrifice to God. You would then catch all the blood that's spilled out, and then you would offer that also as a sacrifice to God, that you're giving this. You're remembering the sacrifice that it takes for forgiveness of sins, the forgiveness for the death angel to pass over. So that's what's taking place. Then they take the lamb, they have to bring it back home to the family that's awaiting, and you have to have a meal prepared by 6 p.m. 6 p.m. that night, you have to have a meal prepared. You prepare the meal. Everyone has to eat, and there's a huge dietary requirements that have to be given at that time. But let's just talk about the lamb. They have to sacrifice the lamb. It has to be roasted. You have to cook it in a roasting method, and then everyone has to eat. When you get to the table, you have to have the most important person at the head of the table. Could you imagine this? You're having a family dinner, and someone says you're sitting at different places, but it's on most important to the least important. So you on one side, you seat the most important person, and then you seat them all the way to the least important person. And the least important person, you know what their job was? It could be a slave. It could be the youngest child. It could be a servant. They had to then wash the feet of everyone that was in the room. That was their job, and that was at the Passover dinner. Do you remember when Jesus comes with his disciples in Jerusalem, what did he do? And what day did he do it? It was on the Passover. There was a place prepared. Y'all remember that? It's all made. That's what's going to go on later on, but this is at 12 years old. He is now going in to Jerusalem. This is happening. Then what happens after the Passover meal is done, there are 7, I could be wrong here, there's either 7 or 8 days that's called the Feast of Unleavened Bread. You've probably heard that before, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Well, what is that? The Feast of Unleavened Bread. You have to then stay in Jerusalem for 7 to 8 days, and you can't eat any kind of bread except for unleavened bread. So that's flat bread, crackers, or pita bread, something like that. No leavening at all for 8 days. After that, the Passover, the Feast of the Unleavened Bread is over and finished, and you can go home. So you guys understand the Passover, what's going on, why Jesus is coming. So let's go into, again, what is taking place here. So his parents are going to Jerusalem. In verse 42, when he was 12 years old, they went up to Jerusalem after the custom of the feast. And when they had fulfilled the days are done. They were there 4 days earlier. They had the Passover meal. They've been now there 7 or 8 days, so it's a little less than 2 weeks. Now they're on their way back. And as they returned, the child Jesus tarried behind in Jerusalem, and Joseph and his mother knew it not. Has anyone ever left their kid anywhere on accident? Have you all done that? Someone else's kid? We've done that before. You know, I've left a kid here or there. My parents, we had 6 kids growing up. I was the oldest of 6, and it was inevitable. We'd come to church or go. It usually happened at church that mom would drive a car and dad would drive a different car because dad drove the church bus and stuff like that. And they'd go home their separate ways, thinking the other one had some of the kids, and they would all get at home. There weren't cell phones to find out. You'd get home, and we forgot Jeff, we forgot Tim, we forgot Christy, or Kathy, or Connie, or Mike, or somebody. Then we had to go back to church and get them. So that's happened to you guys. Well, they left Jesus in Jerusalem. Now remember, there is a big crowd. Remember, walking from Nazareth over to Jerusalem? It wasn't just Mary and Joseph and their kids. It was all their family and friends. So Jesus stays behind in Jerusalem. He's going to do his own thing. And I want you to know this. He wasn't being wrong. He wasn't being disrespectful. He wasn't being dishonorable to his parents. He had another plan. We'll talk about that here in a second. But they, Mary and Joseph, verse 44, supposing him to have been in the company, went a day's journey and sought him among their kinsfolk and acquaintance, family and friends. So they go out about a day, they walk a day away, and then I'm assuming it's probably dusk, and they start asking, hey, where's Jesus at? Have you seen Jesus around? You know, I thought Jesus was with you. He's always with Tommy and Riley. And where's Jesus at? No, they said, no, he's with Nico. And Nico, well, where's Jesus? I don't know where Jesus is. They just start asking around, where's Jesus? They realize Jesus is not there. How would you feel if your kid ain't around?
I would be starting to call 911.
Calling 911. You'd be concerned, wouldn't you? It's time to go look for my kid. I'll tell you a true story. So I was pastoring a church in Texas. It was a church a little bit larger than this, not a whole lot larger. And my son Caleb, you haven't met my son Caleb, but he's a redheaded kid. He's just a great kid. Caleb was gone. I mean, he was gone. After church, we talked to family and friends. He's probably about 3 years old, and he's just absolutely gone. We call 911. We've got people searching the neighborhood. We have people, the lights are out of the church. He's just gone. And we're just absolutely scared to death. We don't know what's going on. We're freaking out, and it takes about 35 minutes. And all of a sudden, he walks out of the church, and we said, where are you at? Where you been? He goes, I've been pooping. And that was so he was just in the bathroom doing his own thing. But we had lost him, and we were just so scared that we lost our kid. Mary and Joseph, it wasn't just for 35 minutes. It was a whole day they haven't found him. So here's what goes on. So they're scared to death. Verse 45, and when they found him not, they turned back to Jerusalem seeking him. What do you think that trip was like? They're already a day out, right? So now they got to drive. They have to walk back another day, just Mary and Joseph. They probably left their other kids with the family and acquaintances. And they have to walk back. They're scared to death. Where was the last time we saw him? Did you have him? Did I have him? Where do you think he's at? Let's kind of talk through that. They get back to Jerusalem. Verse 46, and it came to pass that after 3 days they found him in the temple. After 3 days. So it's a day there, a day back, and now we're not sure, the scholars aren't sure, if they searched for 3 days in Jerusalem, or if it's a day he's gone, a day back, and then a day look, not sure, but there's a 3-day time has passed. All I know for sure is they have not seen Jesus, the 12-year-old son, for 3 days. And they're searching everywhere looking for him. And I want you to know something. They should have searched the place he's at very first. But they went there last. And they find him. They finally find him. They walk in the temple. There's only one temple. It's not like there's a church on every corner. There is one temple. And I want you to understand the scene of what's happening. You've got a 12-year-old kid. Do we have any 12-year-olds here today that are in this room right here? We don't have to get them. But you got a 12-year-old kid. What's a 12-year-old kid usually like? You have a 12-year-old kid. Honoring. Do they have it all together mentally? and understand when you say something, why you're saying. Do they understand that? I'm just going to tell you, I was talking to Pastor Jeffrey. I'm taking a new position, doing something brand new, and he was talking to me about this, that, and the other. And I'm telling you what, at 50 years old, a lot of it was just going over my head. And I don't have complete understanding of what we're talking about, but I know with time I will. But you got a 12-year-old, I'm just trying to paint the picture for you. You got a 12-year-old kid. He is in the middle of the temple. In the temple, there are doctors surrounding the kid. Okay? Doctors of theology. You understand the type of people that are around him? They come in, Mary and Joseph come in the temple, and they see their kid. There's thrill, there's wonderment, there's curiosity that your son is now in the midst of all these doctors. You understand the picture of what's going on? Verse 46. And they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the doctors. He's in the middle of all the doctors. He is hearing them, and he's asking them questions. You know, and this is a truth, that you guys know this, someone that's very intelligent doesn't tell you what they know, they ask you what you know. Have you ever been around someone that's, you've seen the fake smart people that tell you everything they know, because they talk only about themselves. But someone that's really intelligent will ask you questions to find out what you know. And someone that's very smart will ask you questions to help you know something you don't know. Does that make sense? They'll ask you questions to help you know something that you don't know. They're leading your thought process to where you need to go. Jesus is doing just that. He is asking questions, and I guarantee he's asking questions to probe what their belief system is, to make sure it's actually lined up with what the Scripture says. He'd say something like, you are saying this. What about when it compares to this? Or how does that relate to that? And he is asking them questions. Not only is he listening to them, he's asking questions. The next verse says that they're astonished at his answers. They are astonished at what this kid, this 12-year-old boy, has to say. And verse 47, and they that heard him were astonished at his understanding, at his answers. They were astonished that he could understand what's going on, what they're talking about. And by the way, he answered them. Then verse 48. Here we go. Now we've got Mary. I asked Laura this question. If Tommy was gone for 3 days or so, or Sandy, if Nico's gone for 3 days, or any of you, your kids, been gone for 3 days, and you finally see them, what are you going to say? What are you going to say? They've been gone. You didn't know where they were. They didn't ask for permission. They're just gone. What are you going to say? What are you going to say to your kid? You know, what are you going to say? What's that? What were you thinking? You know, I imagine whatever you say now is not actually what you would say. I understand that, because you want to temper it in the church. But Mary, we're about to hear what she has to say to Jesus in the midst of the doctors. So I think some stuff's going on in her mind, so she doesn't completely say everything she wants to say. It's also interesting to see that she took the lead, not Joseph. It's just kind of one of those interesting things. She says, son, here's her words in verse 48. Son, why have you done this to us? Behold, thy father and I have sought thee sorrowing. Why have you done this? We're looking for you when we're sorrowing. And I'm going to tell you what Jesus says here in a second. You can read it and already see it. But I want to paint a little bit of a picture for you. Who is Jesus' real father? Does Joseph know that? No. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I would say yes. Maybe not, but I would say yes. Mary says, your father and I have been looking for you. And we're sorrowing. And I believe all that's accurate. Why have you done this to us? We're sorrowing, and your father and I have been looking. Now listen, Father and I have been looking. This is just one of those things there. I want to read what Jesus says. And this is where we're going to camp out for just a second when we're done. And Jesus says to them, how is it, why have you been searching for me? Wist ye not, didn't you know that I had to be about my Father's business? Was he in the wood shop?
No.
First of all, how would Joseph feel, first of all? There had to be something. Had to be something. True? He said, why are you looking for me? I have to be about my Father's business. So they find him. Jesus said, why are you looking for me? I have to be about my Father's business. Jesus was not unrighteous in anything that he did. Everything he did was right, and it was good, it was godly, it was the right thing to do. There was nothing sinful, nothing wrong. He is God, he's all God. He was going about his Father's business from this time until we see in his ministry some 18, 19 years later. He is under subjection to Mary and Joseph in complete obedience to them. If they told him not to stay behind in Jerusalem, I guarantee he would not have stayed behind. He was just going to go to the temple, and he was doing his Father's business. So the question that I have then is, what was his Father's business? If we're going to camp out on Jesus' words, and Jesus' words have the most important significance, he said, I must be about my Father's business. I must be about my Father's business. I must be. This is going to be the driving force of his life, that I must do my Father's business. I have to do my Father's business. Nothing's going to sidetrack me from doing my Father's business. You can say whatever you want, you can do whatever you want, but Jesus says, I must be about my Father's business. So number one, it tells us that Jesus has an internal drive and desire to do God's will, regardless what anyone else thinks, what anyone else wants, what others' plans are for him. It doesn't matter to him. He's going to do his Father's business. I would then ask, well, what is your Father's business? And I want to kind of share with you what his Father's business is. As we look through the rest of the book of Luke in the next couple of weeks, we're going to see what his Father's business is. Because everything he's doing, would you agree that's his Father's business? Everything he's doing is his Father's business. As I kind of scan the book of Luke, I want to give you 4 thoughts of what his Father's business was. Number one, his Father's business was to teach and disciple others. So Jesus is teaching. Was he teaching in the temple right then? Yes. In the rest of his life, what's his Father's business? I need to teach and I need to disciple. I need to gather around me the 12 disciples. I'm going to show you the Old Testament law. I'm going to show you how it is fulfilled in me. I'm going to show you now a new way and a new covenant and a new life. And I'm going to show you the new thing. He's going to say, hey, I'm going to show you, and you correct me if I'm wrong, and you can add to it in your own mind. These are the things that Jesus taught. And this is next week. I'm going to show you how to resist temptation. I'm going to show you how to have your family life going on. I'm going to show you how to deal with your money. I'm going to show you how to love. I'm going to show you what hell is like. I'm going to show you how to deal with taxes and the government. I'm going to show you about God. I'm going to show you about prayer. I'm going to show you about work ethic. I'm going to show you about sin. And the list goes on and on and on. Jesus teaches, Jesus teaches, Jesus teaches. Why is he teaching? It's his Father's business. And what is the benefit that we can learn from that? So number one, his Father's business is he has to teach us. Number two, his second business, as I look through the New Testament, he's a miracle worker, isn't he? He's a miracle worker. I think part of his Father's business was a miracle worker. What was Jesus' very first miracle? Do you remember? Turn the water into wine. And then what do we find? Give me some of the miracles he does.
He answers prayers.
What's that? Healed the blind. Someone had leprosy. Lazarus rises from the dead.
He heals people that are about to die and bring them out of it.
Bring him out of it. He did that for several people, some things like that. He was a miracle worker. And I believe he did this because he loved people. I believe he loved people. When you, and I talked to Laura about this last night, if you have the capacity to help someone that's in need, and they're right in front of you, and you love them, are you going to help them? We would hope our answer, if we're capable, and if we have the ability to, I'm going to help them. I watched a documentary about this doctor, as an eye doctor, that would go into North Korea, and he would bring some medical equipment that he would donate to the North Koreans, and his only job that he went there was to treat people that had cataracts, people that were completely blind. You can see their eyes are completely glossed over. He would bring them into a back room. He had the capacity of doing this, and he gave them their sight back. Otherwise, the North Korean doctors didn't have the facilities, the education, or the equipment to get it done, and he would do that. And he did what he could do for people, which is commendable. But Jesus, what could he do? Someone brought to him that's lame and they're dropped down through the ceiling, what does he do? He heals them. He loves Lazarus. What does he do? Rise him from the dead. He meets someone that has an issue of blood and touches the hem of his garment. What does he do? Heals them immediately. He's able to do that because he's about his Father's business. He loves people, so he's doing something for them. And then, the third thing that I see, he's the Savior. Jesus is his Father's business is, Jesus came to seek and save that which is lost. Jesus came to do his Father's bidding and to die for people. So he gave his life so people could live eternal life. And then the fourth thing that Jesus did, his Father's business, is that he started the church. We find this in the book of Acts. Jesus says to Peter and the disciples, he says, "You're Peter, and upon this rock I'm going to build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." He built his church. So that was the Father's business. And I want to briefly go through four things that we need to also, and here's the challenge. It's nice to know what Jesus' business was, his Father's business was, but I think there's a spiritual truth here when we see this little Twitter post by Jesus, I need to be about my Father's business, that we also need to be about our Heavenly Father's business. Would you agree? We need to be about our Heavenly Father's business. And I could list and list and list, and Pastor Jeff and I and Justin, we could preach and preach and preach about all the Father's business, and I just want to consolidate it down to four things, and it's sure not pure, and it's just four ideas. Number one, what is the greatest commandment? Love the Lord your God, and love your neighbor as yourself. Love. The very first thing we're going to be about our Father's business is we need to love. I must be about my Father's business. I must love. I must love God, and I must love everyone. Everyone that God brings into my life, I might not like them, but I'm going to love them. Everyone that God brings into my life, I might not like what they do, but I will love them. And I'm going to show you what love is. Love isn't like, I'm okay with everything you do. I'm okay with how you're acting. I'm okay with... Love is this. Love, when Jesus walked in the temple one time, and there are people selling and buying and selling and making profit on the church, what did Jesus do? Turned over the tables. He threw a fit. That was love. Because sometimes love corrects, doesn't it? Love will direct. Love will instruct. Love will hug. Love will help. Love people. We need to love God, and we need to love others. That's the great commandment. What is the great commission? Go into all the world. Tell people about Jesus. Today is Commend Caroline Day. So I did it in Sunday school. I'm going to do it again. So Caroline comes in late last night, comes into our bedroom. I'm very proud of this young lady. She's a great godly young lady. She has a friend at school. Was it a school friend? In school, no one will talk to her. No one will be around this girl. She says, "Hey, do you want to hang out?" Am I saying it correct? She says, "Hey, will you hang out? I want to go out." So she takes her out. And the girl said, "You know what? No one's ever taken me out. No one's ever spent time with me. No one's ever done this." So she was doing this. Caroline then says this. She goes, "I started giving my testimony, started sharing about Jesus." She goes, "I don't know how long it's going to happen. It's going to be really hard, but I hope." She goes, "Wow. I was overwhelmed." And I hope I and all of us, and I hope I and all of us have that desire that we want to bring people to Christ. That is our Father's business, is it not? What was the Passover all about? We want the death angel to pass over them and they'll be protected for all of eternity. That is what Passover was all about. Number 3, obedience. I posted on my Facebook page, if you want to look back at my history, it's about a week ago I posted it. I can't remember the pastor's name. I just can't remember it right now, but he was preaching to Bible Belt Christians, people that come to church all the time. He says the problem with Bible Belt Christians is that we think going to church is enough. And the New Testament says, don't be just hearers of the word, but be doers of the word. You need to obey God. If God is telling you to do something, you got to do it. If you're going to be about your Father's business, you better do the business He told you to do. There's a story in the New Testament where there's a father that has 2 sons. He tells his sons, "Hey, I want you to go do this." One says, "No, Dad, I'm not going to do it." The other one says, "Dad, sure, I'm going to do it." The one that said, "I'm going to do it," was just an act. The other one that said no was like, "I don't want to do it." He had that attitude. He went and did what the father told him to do. Which one was the Father pleased with? The one that said, I'll do it, or the one that did it? Who do you want to be? You're about your Father's business. Are you doing the business of your Father? The fourth thing that Jesus wants us to do that's his business is the church. Do you realize the New Testament? Jeff, help me here. Ephesians was written to who? The church of? How about Philippians? The church of Philippi. And as you talk about most of the New Testament books, who are they written to? The church. The church. The church. In those books, it talks about God gave some pastors and teachers and some this and some that, and all for the exhortation of the church. We find in the book of Acts, in fact, everyone gave together, and they all gave willingly to help the needs of the many of the church. Next week, I'm going to give you a little prep on next week. You guys can start thinking this in your mind, and Pastor Jeff, if you wouldn't mind taking the lead on this next week during the announcements, we're just throwing it on you. I already know what the lesson next week is going to be on how to deal with temptation. That's the next thing Jesus talks about, how to deal with temptation. But also, I want you to be thinking about how can you serve within the church. Next week, Pastor Jeff's going to have index cards. You're going to put your name and your phone number on it, and how you can serve in the church. You're going to write it in there. I can answer phones, or I can serve in the nursery, or I can clean, or I can cut grass, or I can do printing, or I can do this. You're just going to write it in there. And then Pastor Jeff and I, we have an idea of who can do what. We'll call you up. But I want you to think, what can I do within the church? I want you to have that thought. Hey, Jeff, come on up here.
Prayer requests.
And I want you to share with everyone the conversation that you, me, and Justin had. And then I need to say something else real quick, too.
All right, so we've all been watching, the Cattle started 7 years ago, almost 7 years ago. And me and my wife, we started in our basement with our kids. And it just kept growing and growing and growing. It turned into this monster. And it's a monster, but it's a good monster. The problem with that is I have gotten worn out because I've been working extremely hard trying to keep it afloat. And at times it goes like this, and it goes in waves. And every once in a while, it hits a plateau, and every once in a while, it hits a valley. And in those valleys, I get to run just completely off-center. And you guys have probably seen me, I get really scattered. There's times when my mood changes. There's times when I just won't come around here. And I generally like to be a very loving person, so I want to keep that. So we, Justin and myself and Tim, talk, and our church is struggling right now. It's struggling financially, and that's why none of us take salary. We never have, and we don't intend on it. But I always think to myself, a church where the pastors don't take a salary should be doing pretty good. It shouldn't have problems. Of course, we have a financial debt here. It's a big building, and so we want to figure this out. So what I'm doing is I'm turning over to day-to-day everything with Tim for 1 year, kind of like a sabbatical for Jeff, but I'll be here. So, but I'll be reaching. I'll figure it out.
It's rest.
It's rest. Yes, it's rest. And so I will. I'll turn over to Tim, and Tim will put me in here to preach. But Tim will be our major. He will be. So if you have a question there of some sort or anything, Tim is going to be your person. And now that doesn't mean I'm leaving. Doesn't mean justicing. What it means is we're putting one person to run the ship. I've steered the ship, and now I'm starting to look like I got an EWI on my hand with my ship. My boat is going off track, and we need to get it straightened back out. Tim's going to help us, and Tim will kind of play that out for you.
Yeah. Stay right here. I want to kind of share what that's going to look like. It's no longer than 1 year. It could be 1 month, could be 3 months, could be 6 months, who knows, until we get things settled. So what that's going to look like, the preaching, you're going to see mostly me. The building, if there's any questions, if there's any maintenance, if there's anything, it's me. Finances, it's me. Ministry questions, me. Service questions, me. Everything's going to be funneled through me right now. Instead of knowing the question of which pastor do I go to, for the time being, it's just going to be me. And here's the goal of what we're going to try to do during this. We love you guys. We're pouring everything we have into it. We see a great future here. We're going to go towards that great future. I want to share a little bit about where I've been, what I've done, and why I'm taking this role. I've been full-time ministry for over 20 years. I've pastored a small church that ran about 100. As just myself, I was the executive pastor of a church of 1,500 for almost 10 years. So I've done this role, I've done this thing, I know how to get things done and get things accomplished. I've been in the back seat supporting him, and I've done that role. I hope I've done in an honorable role these last 6 or 7 years. And for a temporary time, I'm just going to take the lead. And here's my hope. My hope is, number one, we're going to study the finances. I'm going to share with you here in a second what we're doing. Number two, we're going to study this building, the rooms and things like that. You're going to see in this time period, I'm just going to tell you what is going to happen. This is exactly what's going to happen with the building. That side of the building is going to go over to, I think it's called Creative Start. Gold Kids. They're taking that whole side. February 1st, everything that we have ever had over there, including Eric's Track Club, it's all coming over here, or it's going to be going somewhere else. It's going to go completely gone. They are now going, I'm just going to tell you the numbers. They're going to pay us $5,000 a month, plus utilities, plus insurance on that side, which is going to be a great relief to us. February 1st, that is absolutely happening. Then we're just going to have this side. This side is just going to be maintained by us. We have in the past, and I've talked to Ms. Janet who does our finances, we've been going negative about $1,500 a month. Would you say that's about right? A month. That will steady most of that, but as a result of being $1,500 a month, we are negative. We are negative. We are negative. We are negative. I just can't. We're going to resolve that. Along with taking care of that, here's what's going to happen on this side of the building. We're going to have a nursery. It's going to be a room, you're going to know where it's at. It's going to be fully staffed each week by you. We're going to have a kids class, Miss Betty, that's one of our primary things. Where's Miss Betty at? Miss Betty, we're going to take care of you. You're going to have your own class. You're going to have Bibles in that classroom. You're going to have your dry erase board. You're going to have, I've listened to you over the weeks and months. You're going to have your report board. You're going to have all those things you want, your tables and chairs at your space. We're going to have the youth class dedicated totally to the youth stuff, all the stuff that was rare breed that's been used in the community that's going to be gone. It's going to be, we're going to have our own youth class. Everything is going to be the way it needs to be. We're going to have a structure of who's cleaning the church, who's doing the lawn. We're going to get a complete structure together. It's all going to, again, follow through for that short amount of time. Then we'll get back on with Jeff and Justin and everything else the way it needs to be. But for that short amount of time, it's going to go that way. Do you all understand what we're doing? It's for the benefit of the church, and I'll answer questions later. But that's kind of where we're going to funnel it. The very first thing we need to do is take care of our finances, and I want to let you know where we're at. We need you to continue tithing. The church is going to be here. We're viable as we look at the numbers. There's no problem with us being viable with what's going to happen on that side. Our tithes are enough with what's been coming in to pay for our mortgage and pay for utilities and not much else. But with that being said, we have about $12,000 that we're in debt. So what I've done today, and Miss Janet pays all of our bills out of the church's accounts, I have put together in each of these packets is, and I'm going to read this to you, are our bills and how much they owe. And I've never done this, I've never seen this done, but we're a body of believers. I'm going to ask you to take one of these home, and I'm going to ask you to pay the bill. It might be a minimum payment, it might be $5, maybe God's blessed you can pay a whole bill. We can't do it. We've been behind month after month after month. We have to make payments, and I'm going to tell you right now, until we get, because we have enough to pay what we need to pay, we just can't have these bills as an anchor to us. Does that make sense? We can't have this anchor. So I'm going to ask you guys to graciously take one of these. If you want it to be a charitable contribution, write a check to the Catalyst, put on the memo what it's for, hand this envelope and that check to Miss Janet. Janet, will you stand up so they know who you are? I want to make sure everyone knows who Miss Janet is. If you want to make it as a charitable contribution, just hand it to her, you can take a seat. If you want to just take it home, pay it yourself, whatever you pay is what you pay, I can care less. I'm going to take one of these. Jeff, you're going to take one of these, I'm assuming? So anyone wants to, I'm going to read what they are. And here's the deal. It doesn't matter how we got in debt in the past. You can ask me how we got there. I can give you the answer. It doesn't matter how we got there, but we are in debt. Just help us pay it. Okay, just help us pay it. Because what happened in the past isn't going to happen in the future. We have a MasterCard payment of $1,628. Minimum payment is $108. If you want to look at the minimum payment, I'm going to lay these along the front. We've got a WCA, that's our trash. We're behind $211.98. MediaCom, our internet, we're behind 2 months. Each month is $150, it's $307. Lifeway, $885. This was our Vacation Bible School. All the material there, it's right there. Coca-Cola, we brought some stuff in, $97. Highland, Hilliard, $431 and change. That is our toilet paper, our paper towels, our cleaning supplies, all those things. Staples, $552. I'm not sure what was spent there. Price Cutter, you guys love the donuts. We've been paying monthly what we've been using, but there was about, I'd have to say, 6 months where we didn't make payments on our donuts, $580. General rental, I don't know what we rented, but it was $76. Already paid? Doesn't exist, okay. Pumper Prints, $749. You guys like the t-shirts you wore? I see someone wearing it right there. Oh, that's the same light. Okay, so that's what we've got. Here's what I'd like to do. Jeff, how do you want to do this?
If you're not interested, don't.
Yeah, if you're not interested, don't do it. If you can come and grab one and pay $5, if you pay the whole thing, you can come up here, but I'd like all of you, let's all stand. And if you want to come up now, you want to come up after the service is over, basically, he's just going to say, if you want to come up and grab one, just please do. And if you want to grab with somebody else and you do it together, that's great. The bill's in there, the envelopes.
Before you're dismissed, before short conversations, the door, the engines hiss, before Sunday lunch, Sunday nap, Sunday that, Sunday this, before your errands and plans and inevitable to-do list, before you wake up tomorrow just to forget whatever you promised, whatever God taught us, whatever you've jotted down on your journal, phone, or wrist, before you're dismissed, I just want to say that Christianity is not what you've done here today. This was 0.5% of your week. 168 hours minus 56 for sleep, 112 to be alive, and this one that's now complete is supposed to spread like yeast to make leaven the loaf of the other 111? Which begs the question, are you trying to do in one day what God has meant for 7? So before you're dismissed, be reminded of this. Church is not only what you've just experienced, but exists in a life outside these walls that hears the words of Christ and answers their calls. So before you go about your other 111, remember that only when you leave the church building can you create the kingdom.